The thing about South Pacific and King and I is that in contrast to Oklahoma and Carousel and Allegro, because of Allegro, they got burned by Allegro. And they had originally thought of themselves as very experimental collaboration. They were writing the lyrics first. They were treating the story seriously. And I think they didn't want to hire known actors. They were not writing for stars. So Oklahoma and Carousel is not about John Reid or others. It's about the story. But after Allegro, South Pacific becomes the first show they start writing for stars. And that's what, they start to play it safe. And they have two big hits in the safe zone. Also, it's a show that has a relationship more between an older man and a younger woman in both South Pacific and King and I. And it's, I think, an important component of Oscar, that he felt there was he had a moral responsibility to do uplifting plays. And many of his shows, most of his shows, at least the later shows with Rogers, have something going on in that way. Subsuming your differences in Oklahoma, making amends in Carousel. Allegro is about getting to what's real and important in your life. South Pacific. King and I is about speaking to power. I've said as much as I could probably say about King and I. Though 'Tis a Puzzlement is a wonderful story. I mean, it's one of my favorite songs because it really shows what happens when an absolute ruler has to start questioning himself. That questioning yourself becomes much more complicated no matter how much of a king you are. And that to me, to show doubt is really a wonderful thing coming from an absolute ruler. In 1943 and 45, the only people that Rodgers and Hammerstein were competing with was Rodgers and Hammerstein. They had shows on all over the place, and they were just checking to see which shows were doing better. By 1951, 53, 55, they were in the decline. You had Me and Juliet. You had Pipe Dream. Ugh. You had, and then you had Flower Drum Song, which, while was a giant boon to then nascent Asian American acting community, it had an expiration date, as all intergenerational assimilation shows do. So there was nothing really left to them, and it was right up his alley. It was such a phenomenal success. The best way to describe it is that I think 3 people watched every television set in America on the night that it was aired, and that this went on CBS. On NBC, ABC, and all the other channels, they just ran test patterns because they closed down. Because the producers of those shows wanted to watch this show. And there was no point in putting on another show. But again, this comes at the very end of their career. And the only thing that follows this, it becomes Sound of Music.